I want to talk to you today about how you can really get to grips with your health. It's a bit long and there's some science in it, but I hope it will open your eyes to a new way of thinking about your health and well-being, because we are so much more than our senses. Actually, our senses are quite limited. We can only see a small spectrum of light. We don't see infrared or ultraviolet, which other animals can see. We don't hear as well as other animals like bats or dogs, and we don't smell as well as dogs either. So our senses are quite limited, really. Now, a lot of you will say, if I can't see it or touch it, I don't believe it. We like to see evidence before we believe something exists. But if our senses are so limited, are we missing out on something? Well, actually, we have a lot more than just our 5 senses to gather evidence. We feel vibrations, we sense temperature, we have joint position sense, which tells us which position our body is in. And that helps us navigate uneven ground when we're walking. But there's so much more. So an ophthalmologist or eye doctor wrote a book back in 1973 about how we have an alternative pathway in our eyes. It's not for seeing, it's for stimulating our pineal gland, our pituitary gland, and then all our other hormones. It's primitive, it's not something that we pay much attention to, but it's present in lizards and other reptiles. And it's in response to sunlight, even though we don't see it. So we need sunlight, especially in the morning, to stimulate it, and it helps so many parts of our bodies through different glands and hormones. So what else? Well, intuition. We use our intuition all the time, our gut feeling about things. Like when we walk home on a dark night, our intuition is turned on about what's safe. When we make decisions. Now, a recent study interviewed 100 CEOs of large companies and asked them how they make decisions about their business. Almost all of them say they use intuition or gut feeling. So who knew that they were using intuition rather than facts and data, which we tend to rely on a lot? We also pick up frequencies. We're very sensitive to the atmosphere in a room. You know, when you walk in and you feel, oh, this is weird. You know, if somebody's arguing and you walk in, you can immediately sense that there's an atmosphere between these two people. We're also really conscious when somebody is staring at us. Have you ever tried this? Pick a busy place and focus on somebody walking through. I guarantee within a few seconds, they'll look up, probably at you, because they feel somebody is staring at them. Now, this is a well-known phenomenon, and it was really useful to us in the past. We really needed to know, when we were cave people, whether something was stalking us, like a saber-toothed tiger, and so we would hide in the long grass, and we'd have this sense if something was staring at us, because it could be a predator. So it was very useful for our survival. Another example is group mood. Have you ever been at a football match when the atmosphere is electric? Everyone's singing and chanting, and you immediately feel in a good mood too. Comedians talk about audiences being good or sometimes being very inhibited at times. So the group atmosphere can really affect you. Another example is electromagnetic fields, or EMF. Wi-Fi, electric overhead power cables, mobile phones. These all have electromagnetic fields which can be harmful to us in some situations. And then there's ESP. So some people have extrasensory perception where they can sense events happening or they sense to make contact with people. And I'm sure most of you have had an experience where you think about a long lost friend just out of the blue. You just have this thought about them. And then suddenly the next week they call you. Some people call it synchronicity, but certainly there's some sort of connection there where people, maybe over vast distances, have some sort of mental connection with each other that makes them get in touch. Now, we all have these abilities, but some of us are more in touch with them than others. And it can also run in families, so you can have families of people who are really in touch with these kind of other senses that we have. Now, of course, some of you won't believe in ESP, and there are some scientists who are trying to debunk these senses we seem to have. We call those people materialists. They only measure what can be seen and collected as data within our limited senses. So they deal in material. That's why they're called materialists. So you might feel that you're a materialist, or you might feel, well, actually, I think it's interesting that there are some of these extra senses. But there is so much science now supporting evidence for these abilities that we can't ignore them anymore. Your body is an antenna receiving signals from many different sources. And that can be from 5G towers, or it can be far away from places like the moon and its planets. At the same time as being an antenna, our bodies emit electromagnetic waves too. And that can be measured when we do an ECG or EKG of your heart. We're measuring the body's electrical activity in the heart. Or an EEG of the brain, we're measuring the brain's electrical activity. So that's quite normal for our bodies to emit energy, and we have this energetic field throughout our body. It's just easily measured in the heart and the brain. But did you know that the earth has its own hum, its own electrical activity too? So the earth vibrates at a certain frequency. It's called the Schumann's resonance. And there are lots of geophysicists who study this natural frequency. It was discovered in 1952 by a physicist named William Schumann. It can vary a bit depending on solar flare activity from the sun, and it's also very active before earthquakes. It's possibly caused by lightning strikes in the atmosphere. The average resonance that the earth vibrates at is around 7.83 gigahertz. Now, some people call that the earth's heartbeat. And interestingly, our brains emit waves at about the same frequency. We're in tune with the earth's natural resonance. Okay, so what has this to do with health? Well, let me go back to the very beginning, the Big Bang. At the beginning of time as we know it, the Big Bang erupted and created the universe. And as far as I know it, the universe is still expanding. So everything came from this first atom, the very first subatomic particle. From this came all the galaxies, planets and stars, right down to the molecules in our water, our food and our bodies. In this respect, since we are all connected originally from the one origin, every atom is still connected to each other in some way. And this can actually be measured. Experiments have shown that when you have two atoms that are connected but separated in different locations, you do something to one atom and the other behaves as if the same thing has happened to them. Einstein called this effect spooky action at a distance. And it's been well observed in scientific experiments with photons or light particles. It's also, observed in animals. So there have been studies where there's different groups of rats in different locations in the world. For example, they teach the group of rats in LA, in the US, a new skill. And somehow or other, rats that are being studied in Australia or in Europe, at the same time, they also learn this new skill. How amazing is that? There's lots of evidence that somehow or other atoms can be connected, particles can be connected, and also the atoms making up an organism can also be connected in some way that we don't fully understand yet. Another interesting point is cosmologists and astrophysicists have observed that there's a lot of matter and energy out in space and around us that we can't measure accurately with the tools that we've got. at least not yet. They call it dark energy and dark matter simply because they don't know much about it. But it forms a kind of invisible matrix around the universe and around us. And it's perhaps how ESP might work, tapping into the information travelling through this matrix of dark energy. There's nothing wrong with it because it's called dark energy. It's just called that because we don't really know much about it. Now, we've done the big picture. We're going to zoom right into atomic particles. And quantum physics is the big talking about these days, and it is fascinating. What does quantum physics say? Well, it states that atoms can be waves or particles, and they can switch between the two. This was first observed with light particles. Sometimes they behave as light particles called photons, and sometimes they behave as light waves. How cool is that? But what makes them change? Well, the theory is that atoms exist as waves most of the time, but they only condense down into particles when they are observed. Now, if you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, you'll know about this dilemma. Schrodinger's cat was a thought experiment thinking about a cat that's placed in a box with some poison. Now, you can't tell whether the cat is alive or dead while it's in the box. It's only when you open the box and observe the cat that you know whether it's dead or alive. This theory applies to everything: light, matter, perhaps even everything in our universe. Every atom in the universe can be a wave or a particle, and this applies to all the atoms in our body too. We can see the particles that we are made up of that form organs and tissues. But we are also sensitive to energy waves too. We're sensitive to energy waves that might be harmful to us, but then also energy healing can be good for us, and it can coordinate the energy within our body, and it can also bring the energy down in our body back to a healthy level. One theory to explain how this works is the theory of multiverses, and string theory is another attempt to explain what's happening in the universe with atoms changing between particles and waves. But even computers, which are built on just two options, zeros and ones, quantum computers exist in a superstate where it can be a 0 and a 1 at the same time. And that means multiple calculations can be done at any one time. So that's hard to get your head around, I know, but it is fascinating. And quantum computers exist today and are being used. But anyway, let's get back to our story. We've got that we're all connected, that atoms can be waves or particles, and we've got energy, which we can't explain, floating around in a matrix in the universe. So what has this to do with health? Well, I'm getting to this. Let's talk now about consciousness, another fascinating area. There's so much research going on about how we're conscious and what does it mean and where is it sited in the body. Consciousness is defined as the state of being aware and able to think about oneself, one's surroundings, thoughts and experiences. We can identify ourselves as separate from our surroundings. Now, lots of research has been done with animals to detect how conscious animals are, and surprisingly, they're a lot more conscious than we first believed, especially mammals such as dogs and primates. So we're pretty much conscious of ourselves. And what about higher consciousness? Higher consciousness refers to a state of expanded awareness, insight, or understanding that goes beyond ordinary waking consciousness. This means we have an expanded understanding of the meaning of events in our lives. We are zooming out and looking at our everyday problems in the context of a higher plane. It's as if we're zooming out into space and looking at the earth and its problems as a puny little disturbance in the eternal universe. Now, the interesting thing is that the concept of higher consciousness is not new. Carl Jung, the very famous psychiatrist who was a pupil of Sigmund Freud, he talked about the collective unconscious, that there are common themes which we have inherited from our ancestors, and individual consciousness can be affected by this. In other words, we are all connected together in a higher consciousness, like quantum physics talks about and the Big Bang explains. So he was aware of this and tried to explain it. We may have an individual higher consciousness, but we can all be connected together through a universal higher consciousness existing since the Big Bang. This means we are all connected, and how we treat others is affecting all of us too. Now, this aligns with many Eastern religious practices like Buddhism and Taoism, where the goal is to attain a higher consciousness and understanding and become a better person or a better version of ourselves. And this is where quantum physics and beliefs come together really well. Now, quantum physics can also align with other concepts. Materialists would say we only have one life, we live and die, and that's the end. However, quantum physics suggests that we could exist as a pure energy field and only become physical when we are observed. Now, this could explain the theory of reincarnation, where we exist as an energy field of higher consciousness and then crystallize into human form for a time on Earth. After death, we go back to being an energy field of higher consciousness. This explains very neatly, again, where quantum physics and beliefs align. There's quite considerable research evidence now on children who say that they have lived a previous life and were someone else. Several doctors have spent their whole career studying these children. Thus, reincarnation could come from choosing to come back to Earth again, to live another life, to learn more, and each time achieve a higher consciousness level so that we eventually achieve nirvana or bliss, according to Buddhist traditions. Now, if you accept this theory as plausible, then it relieves a lot of suffering. If you're worried about your health and perhaps you have a terminal illness, this might give you some comfort to know that you could have another crack at life and that death is not the end. It's just a transition from one form to another. And lots of studies on near-death experiences support this theory. It can also give you some comfort if you're experiencing a lot of problems, relationship issues, financial issues. Taking a higher consciousness approach helps you put your problems into perspective, like you step back and observe yourself, what you're thinking, what your emotions, what your triggers are. This helps you put your problems into perspective so you have less emotional triggers and you can problem solve your way out of the difficulty. It can also help you break free from mistakes in the past affecting your present life, maybe through guilt and shame, dwelling on the past, and also help you resolve trauma. We catastrophize, and the little thing that we worry about rarely happens. And as Buddha said, all things shall pass. In other words, all problems resolve themselves one way or the other, really, eventually in the end. This can be a really useful approach for mental health problems, anxiety, depression, addiction, but it can also be really appropriate for physical problems too, like blood pressure and heart disease. Most diseases are badly affected by stress, so anything that relieves your stress by changing how you think about things will be really useful. Another concept of quantum physics is that time and space really don't exist. Without going into the explanations of this, if it is true, then the past only exists in our mind. Our trauma only exists in our mind. Trauma doesn't have a separate existence. It only exists in our memory in here. And so we can do something about that. In this little chart, I want to show you that our brain vibrates at different energies depending on what mood we're in. And as you can see, if you're in a nice, relaxed, happy state, your brain vibrates in a sort of higher energy. And when you've got a lot of anger or resentment or fear or a lot of guilt or shame, then you can vibrate in this much lower frequency that is detrimental to your health. And it also, people can pick up on these energies and they can not want to be around you. People are attracted to other people who are vibrating at a nice, relaxed, happy energy. You know the saying, laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. Well, the basis of that saying is the vibrational energy that we give off. And this can really affect your success in relationships. It can affect your relationship with co-workers. It can affect your promotion prospects because people pick up on your energy. There's a lot of reasons to fix the energy that is emitted from your body. We've talked about the energy in the universe and how we're all connected through the Big Bang. We've talked about quantum physics showing that we have energy fields, that we're all made up of energy, and possibly, we come down to earth for a period of time, go back into higher consciousness, and then perhaps come back to earth for another go at it. Then we've talked about what is higher consciousness and what does it mean and how it helps you. So how do we move to a higher consciousness where we are emitting a more relaxed energy, where we're not in these lower frequencies of anger, resentment, guilt, shame and despair? And how do we achieve higher consciousness where we can step back from our problems and look at them in a more detached way in terms of the big picture, rather than focusing down on these problems which lower our energy and make us more angry and resentful and hurt. So the first step is reading more and listening more about these concepts that we've talked about today. There are many free podcasts out there on these topics. Lots of people are now starting to awaken to this and use it as a way to improve their health. People like Dr. Joe Dispenza, very popular guy who's helping a lot of people. So getting more information and reinforcing this information from different aspects is really useful too. Don't just take my word for it, but listen to other people as well. And then meditation also helps. So meditation helps with calming our brain, with bringing that energy up from those low energy feelings of despair and anger up into the calming frequencies that are associated with feeling happy and relaxed and satisfied. And then it also helps you being in the moment, in the present, where the past cannot bother us and the future is nothing to worry about. Now, we've covered many difficult subjects today, but I hope it's given you some insight and opened the door to a different way for you to view your problems and your health. You can watch this video over again a few times if you feel it's all been a bit too much for you. In future videos, we're going to build on these concepts to show you how to deal with health problems in a different way. And also, I'll be giving you some meditations for you to work on. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. So talk soon.